Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo reached a new level of trilateral cooperation at Kemp David in a landmark summit last week. Seen as a milestone moment in the history of diplomacy in the 21st century, it's carved out a new mechanism for security cooperation in the Indo-Pacific and set out a bolder role for South Korea's diplomacy. To discuss more, we have our Presidential Office correspondent Sooyoung back here in the studio. Welcome back, Sooyoung.
Hi, Dami. Lovely to see you today.
So, Sooyoung, lots of deliverables out of the Kemp David Trilateral Summit. What do you have to say the key achievements are?
Right, well, as you said, Dami, there were many initiatives that were announced after the leaders' meeting, but I would summarise the outcomes with four main points. First of all, putting the cogwheels in place to enable cooperation by establishing annual leaders' summits, as well as meetings between high-level officials on security, defence, foreign affairs and trade, as well as creating new dialogue channels in areas such as cyber defence, emerging technologies and even social development. Second were practical measures to deter North Korea's growing nuclear and missile capabilities. A combined military drill once a year is to take place, along with the launch of a missile warning system by the end of the year. Third, the three countries agreed to jointly face the various economic uncertainties and new technologies that trigger changes across industries, the military, as well as society, through supply chain cooperation, as well as co-develop new technologies and ethical standards and measures to prevent theft. Lastly, South Korea, the United States and Japan are aiming to align their stances and act as one to any emerging security challenge. That is the very premise of the commitment to consult, where they immediately discuss new threats, whether that is North Korea's missile provocations or disruptions in a critical supply chain. Thus, you can see that the three countries are trying to act as one distinct and independent entity. It's not an alliance, but it is definitely a force to be reckoned with.
You know, Sooyoung, I have to ask you then, can the Kemp David agreements live up to expectations? I mean, can they truly transform the security architecture of Indo-Pacific?
Right, well, you know, at the end of the day, all three countries are democracies with elections, so they are subject to and have certainly been you know, these political changes in the leadership and the political environment in all three countries, and thus the Kemp David measures were clearly designed to prevent, to the best of their ability, any backtracking on the progress seen in the relationship, particularly between Seoul and Tokyo since March, when they actively began building bridges over a historical dispute that spiraled into a trade war back in 2019.
That the three of them want to strengthen links at all levels, from the leaders level to the working level, including the expert level. There's also discussion about potentially working with the next generation of experts as well. So I think that means that this is a long-term ambition that the three of them share, and if it is implemented, it would really transform the relationship between the three of them, between Korea, the US and Japan.
It leaves the door open for greater military cooperation between the three countries as they combine their capabilities and enhance their interoperability.
Another productive initiative could focus on identifying areas for cooperations between Korean Massive Punishment and Retaliations (KMPR) and Japan's new precision strike capability. Both South Korea and Japan are improving their deterrence by developing the capabilities needed to retaliate against the DPRK attack with the rapid and devastating conventional strikes. The US, South Korea, and Japan should explore possible synergies between these efforts.
Also, beyond Korean Peninsula security, the three countries agreed to work closely with other value-based regional initiatives, such as the AUKUS Security Pact between Britain, the US and Australia, and the Quad, composed of the US, Japan, India and Australia. Now, their interests overlap not only on security issues, but also on vital non-military issues, such as key technologies, food security and development. Adding Korea to the mix would weave important initiatives together.
I think if you look at AUKUS, it is very technical. It is based on the delivery of nuclear power submarines. Plus, if you look at the second pillar, development of new technologies. So it's not about dialogue. Now, if we look at the Quad, it is really much more based on dialogue, summits at different levels. There are some scholarships involved. There's talk about initiatives that are going to be implemented together. But even if you look, for example, at technology, is something that the 4 members of the Quad cannot implement unless they're working together with Korea, with Taiwan, maybe with European countries as well. So that's.
But obviously, China is going to see these recent developments as a threat to its security, because the Kemp David Trilateral Summit particularly included that criticism of China's behavior. Now, the question is, will this put South Korea in a difficult position, right?
Right, there certainly have been concerns over what this means for South Korea's trade and cooperation on North Korea's denuclearization efforts as well, among other issues affecting the two neighbours. But relations with China have arguably always been difficult to manage, given the pressure on Seoul to be deferential to Beijing. On top of the rather obvious cases of forceful diplomacy, economic coercion and belligerent behaviour in the South China Sea, China is posing a vastly different, strongly authoritarian model of development and values in the world, using its clout and harnessing emerging technologies in ways that could disrupt and undermine individuals, societies, business prospects and intellectual property. Like most European Union countries, Seoul has also maintained that it wants to continue trade and cooperation with China in necessary fields. But at Camp David, it was made clear that its fundamental values align with the free world. Now, China has reacted very nervously and rather angrily to the growing cooperation between the United States and its neighbours. But experts say, given the vitality of economic ties with South Korea and the slowing growth for the Chinese economy, Beijing might not act as rashly as it did in the past to punish Seoul.
And unfortunately, to Beijing's dismay, it only recorded 6.3 growth over the second quarter, although it was expected to reach at 7.1%. So under the circumstances, economic issues are at the forefront, and Beijing needs South Korea more than before. So we can expect no punitive economic measures coming from Beijing too soon at this stage.
Well, considering the divergent domestic views of Yoon's diplomacy in South Korea, where does this trilateral cooperation place South Korea in the region and in the world? I mean, is it worth it for Seoul?
Well, all signs seem to say yes. So the presidential office has said that South Korea has now reached a point where it stands alongside advanced economies with democratic societies. Now, this means calling for international rules and norms to be respected, caring about human rights and supporting development in regions that brings freedom for all citizens. Thus, the Yoon administration has taken a bolder stance on regional and global affairs compared to the past, when the country focused on trade relations and tried to rather evade politically contentious issues. Now, as much as there are clear costs for doing so, mostly economically, Seoul's value-based choice and alignment with other democratic countries have enabled a greater and deeper level of trust, really elevating its status and expanding its involvement in multilateral institutions. Now, experts say South Korea's role in global governance has been underscored, especially after President Yoon's strengthening of ties with NATO and Ukraine as well, to which he made a surprise visit last month.
But also you have seen strengthening relations with Poland, with Estonia, with Norway, with other NATO members that are also boosting their armed deals with Korea, but also the security links with Korea. So you can see how the position of Korea beyond its core alliance, which is the US, and even beyond its core region, which is Northeast Asia, has been boosted thanks to its relationship with NATO.
Well, according to the presidential office, contributing to human rights, rule of law and freedom across the region and the world as well really promotes peace and prosperity, which in turn would not only boost South Korea's security, but also economic opportunities through diverse trade, technological and cultural exchanges with advanced tech nations like the United States and Japan, as well as new emerging markets.
Right, in the long run, that trickles down to the livelihood of everyday people.
Exactly.
Well, it's still early days, but it looks like there's a great potential for the three-way cooperation to expand and benefit the countries, the region, and eventually the world.
I think you're exactly right, Dami.
All right, Sooyoung, thank you so much for your reporting today, as always.
Thank you so much for having me.